Erica Lindsay Ayala here once again with head coach of the Metropolitan Riveters, Ivo Mocek. This is, of course, Coach's Corner, where we get to talk to Ivo every week, pick his brain, not only about your favorite PHF hockey team, but also just about coaching in general. Ivo, how are we doing today?
Doing great, great to see you as always, and ready to do another one here.
I love it. I love it. These conversations are great. I know people are reacting well to them. It's just because you're such a fun guy. I don't know where the evil thing comes from, really.
You know what? I don't know where the fun comes from. Like everybody tells me that I'm evil. So I'm glad to hear that. Though there are some people, at least.
There we go. We're crushing stereotypes.
Yep.
We're changing the narrative.
For sure. Yeah.
I love that. Well, Coach, last time on Coach's Corner, we had a really important conversation about just the mental part of the game. And of course, the Riveters with Captain Madison Packer have really taken up the mantle when it comes to having those conversations about mental health and wellness. And so first and foremost, just thank you for being open and sharing your feedback there. But what we also alluded to on the last Coach's Corner is that you are a coach of coaches. And I have to imagine that is a very interesting dynamic when you're coaching people who are also responsible for their own teams at a variety of different levels. But even with your assistant coach, I mean, that's someone who's been on your roster before. So why don't we start with assistant coach Kelly Nash? You've known her as a player. Now she's a bench boss with you and took over completely in Toronto. But what can you tell us about Kelly Nash? And are there things that have translated from Kelly Nash, the player, that you see in her coaching style?
First, I got to start with that. Kelly and I did not know that when she was still playing and she was on a team. I didn't really maybe see it that much, but Kelly and I just see the game in such a similar way. Like we really just agree on things, makes things so much easier. Same thing when designing practice plans, and putting line combinations together. And it's just sometimes we really just say a thing or text one thing to one another, and then we're like, wow, like I was just thinking the same thing, so it makes things so much easier, to communicate and work with your coaching partner like that. And I was lucky enough that even last season, with Stretch, it was the same exact thing. And sure, Stretch and Kelly are different people, but that hockey, point of view, like it was very similar. So with Kelly, I'm just going to continue in that work. And if there are things that translate, I mean, she's definitely she's a forward originally, right? That's the biggest difference from Stretch, but she likes to look for different things, and how to beat the opponent. She's trying to be creative, so that's I remember her from her playing days, as a creative forward who would always prefer the pass instead of shooting, so I think that she kind of carries that on with her.
Yes, Kelly Nash was definitely someone exciting. You felt that things were going to happen. I think she just had a way of seeing the ice and creating, as you said, for other folks, and was fun to watch. Was able to be a part of a championship winning team with the Riveters. So you have that pedigree, and that's 2 years in a row now that you've had someone that's been able to win with this Riveters team as a part of your coaching staff. But I want to stick with Kelly Nash and talk about Toronto because, you were unable to travel for that trip. So Kelly was taking on all of the responsibilities as a head coach, and doing all of that without the assistance of anyone else. So what can you tell us about what you heard from Kelly and maybe even from the team after she had that experience in Toronto?
Well, when I talked to Kelly at practice, I asked her like how did it go, and she was like, it was a lot. But I'm like, I know, it's I've been there, and it is a lot, to manage a professional hockey team on your own. Like it is a lot, especially on the road, right? So there are many other aspects to it, right? But when I asked her about games, and between periods, and video sessions, and then I asked a few players about the same thing, like they were all like saying, hey, Kelly did a great job, and there was no doubt in anybody's mind, and we did not really notice any difference, or if any, just a very little. So I'm very grateful, that she took that on, for that weekend, and then I'm very proud of her how she handled that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think what's been great about the now PHF, but the NWHL and now to the PHF is that you have been able to see different people step up into different roles and take on different leadership. And so it was great to see Kelly Nash be one of those bench bosses that has experience being on the ice. As I alluded to, you also have other players that they coach when they're not representing the Riveters. And so when you think about that, and obviously none of them are coaching in the PHF or even really, as you mentioned, at the professional level. But I would imagine, when you're a coach, as you mentioned, what Kelly had to do in Toronto, you're in charge of a lot of moving parts. And there's a few ways that you could take that when you're on the ice as a player. Maybe it's like, oh, thank goodness, like, oh, don't have to worry about that. Or, sometimes people's brains are kind of always on, right? And they're always thinking about the minutia and the details. And so I'm just thinking of generally about those characteristics that you might come across. And what is your approach to that when you're coaching other coaches?
You know what? It's very helpful in different situations, obviously, but I can tell what you said. I totally agree with that. That some players look at the game, from a player's perspective, right? But at the same time, they still kind of think, oh, I'm coaching here now too a little bit, right? Some players just totally, shut it off, and just play. But for example, last weekend in Toronto, I knew that on the defensive end, of our group, like there is Kristen Barbara, right? There is Leela who's doing some coaching, right? So I kind of knew that since Kelly was the only coach there on the bench, the only bench boss, right? I knew that we had Barb's, in the back, so she could kind of step up if needed, So it's actually it's nice to know that you have players or people like that on a team who can, give you that extra voice if needed.
Yeah, I love that. And using it as a resource. And
Yeah,
in a
absolutely.
situation like that, of course, I think that's really awesome. I mean, also Emily Janiga, I believe, has some coaching experience. I mean, last year you would have had, Rebecca Morris, aka Moose. And I think what's cool is that players for the Riveters throughout the franchise history have always had a really strong hold in the New Jersey or greater metropolitan community, even outside of the things that are planned as part of the league or, some opportunities, even with other professional hockey teams or sports teams in the area. And I think that, really just gives an opportunity for the coaches to kind of get out there and get to know the community and start those building blocks for what the future for particularly girls hockey can look like. When you think of the opportunity for, girls in the metro area to be coached by professional athletes, like, people who've won championships, are all stars, are points leaders in the league. I mean, what do you make of that as someone that gets to watch that every single time you hit the ice with the Riveters?
First of all, I wish, I had that kind of experience, growing up, and sure, I would go, watch hockey games. I had a professional team in my hometown where I grew up. So I would go watch them, at least once a week when they play, sometimes when they would practice. But having them coach me, like that would be, I don't want to say a game changer, but it would definitely make a huge difference to me, right? So I think it's very exciting that the girls, and the young players in New Jersey in the situation that they get to, soak in all the knowledge, from players or from coaches who are still very much players and who are professional players, right? So we saw that at our first weekend against Connecticut, right? It was so nice to see all the girls with the posters and the banners. And I was like, wow, this is absolutely phenomenal, right? So I had goosebumps, looking at some of the photos, some of the footage. So I think it's number one, it's great, to grow the game, obviously, and spread the word. Number two, if you're a young player, like you really want to learn from the best, right? And that's what these girls are getting, right? And number three, it's just it helps us, to attract more people, and it helps us, to create more buzz about our team and the league.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love going to Barnabas Health Hockey House, having the glass for warm-ups, just like full of posters and, folks banging on the glass. Russo is always good. You got to look out for number 18 on the ice, but Russo in particular is really good for flicking some pucks over to fans. So I'd get down to ice level if he can for warm-ups. But there's another aspect of this that I think is really interesting, or it could potentially be pretty interesting for you. You have some coaches that are on your bench as your players, and then there are perhaps athletes that coaches sometimes see as people who would make great coaches. And every once in a while, you'll find an athlete that's like, nah, I'm not doing that. And then they end up being some of the greats. I was just thinking on my women's basketball side of things. I mean, Becky Hammon was an undrafted player, came to the New York Liberty, worked really hard, ended up being an all-star when she went to San Antonio. Or Dawn Staley, and their coaches would be like, you'd probably make a good coach. And Dawn Staley especially was like, no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not doing that. So I wonder what your approach is. Like, have you ever coached someone that you think would make a fantastic coach? And how much of, is it like awkward to have that conversation? Are you worried about putting people off when they're not even done with their playing days? Like, what's your approach to that?
Before I get to that, I gotta kind of follow up on the basketball talk. Like fingers crossed that Sue Bird, becomes the next coach, of the Liberty team. Just saying. But I read the rumors at the news, with Wiesek. But to answer your question, I feel at least over the last 2.5 seasons now, I've been coaching this team. I gotta say, Kira, for example, like for sure, like Kira would be such a great coach. Understands the game well, extremely hardworking, always, always ready, always in shape, always, on time, punctual, it's all the things, you want to check, for a good coach. Like she has them. She's like her demeanor, she's calm, she can have a conversation with you. She can explain things to you well. So you understand them. Even sometimes I would have a conversation with her like, wow, like she just, schooled me right now. Like she like, yeah. Anyway, so she's definitely the first one that, pops in my head. The next one would definitely be Packer, right? Packer is just her knowledge of the game, the way she sees the game. Not that many people, I have met, in my life through hockey, understand the game that well. So she's definitely up there on the list. Emily's a great coach in my opinion. Like she's doing a great job. She cares so much, so she's the next one for sure. And I really don't want to forget anyone, but these three, would definitely be the top three on the list.
I love that. I mean, Kira Arena, one of the OG Rivs, has stepped aside, growing her family. Congratulations, of course, to her. But I think you're absolutely right. Kira's demeanor is just, it's like warm. I almost said buttery, just because you're just like melted by everything that she says. And even if it is, not the most pleasant thing, you're just like, okay, I'm with you. I am with you. Yes. And let's do this.
Absolutely. And to be honest, in the bubble in like Placid, right? That last game in Minnesota, when I had to, step off the bench, it was only Stretch on the bench, but before I left, I literally, like, the last thing I said on the bench was, I talked to Kira. I'm like, hey, you're running the D now. So and she did it, there was not much to do, right? In that situation, it was just a complete chaos because nobody knew what was going on, right? But she did it, she stepped up, so she's great, but I'm still kind of hoping that her playing days are not over yet.
Hey, that makes two of us, and I'm sure there's more. So we'll just leave it in the chat if you want Kira Arena back. And if we get to one more person, I think that's what it is. That's all we need. Yep, 3 is a good number. Oh man, that would be fantastic. Well, Coach, I think this was a great Coach's Corner, coaches talking to coaches. But as always, I like to leave off with just a little bit of advice that you'd give to someone who's in coaching right now, or maybe someone that's thinking about it. And that would be this. When it comes to preparation, you talked about some of the characteristics of the athletes that you have that are coaching. But what would you say in preparation for wanting to lead others are some of the most important skill sets to refine?
Patience, for sure. It's important, right? I said that last time, knowing your audience, right? You got to know, who you talking to, right? So, and then just the ability to connect with your players, with your team, right? And at the same time, explain things well, right? And because that's the key here, right? You cannot really teach anyone, if you really cannot, if they cannot really understand what you're saying, right? So I always try to make sure that that's one of the things I really focus on, just making sure that players know what I want them to do. So yeah, that would be a top. And my last thing would be, I always feel that the coach should be the hardest working member of the organization, right? Meaning, I just recently listened to a podcast with college coach Andy Murray, right? And he said that, he's like, hey, my philosophy is first key, last key, meaning that he's the first one going into the locker room, or going into the building, actually, he said, and he's the last one leaving it, right? And he's like, and I feel the same way. Like, I know I'm not the best coach in the world, never will be, but I'm learning. But I always want my players to know that I always come to the ring prepared, and I always put the work in, and they need to feel that, because if they don't, they don't have any trust in you, they don't have any confidence with you.
I love it. I feel like every week we just reaffirm that you are definitely a coach that believes in building a strong foundation, and that is relational and really building trust and communication. I absolutely love that. But don't sell yourself short there, Coach. If I can add, I am not a coach, but I will add my 2 cents here that being a lifelong learner sounds like a pretty good way to accomplish some of the things that you've already mentioned. And it sounds like you have that humility to do that and the willingness to learn anywhere from anyone. And I think that makes a great coach as well.
I could not agree more. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, always a pleasure. We look forward to what next week brings us. We might have to bring on a few guests here because, again, you've got a team full of coaches, and a little roundtable might be nice.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So there's definitely a couple of characters, that would be great for this, who are coaching, but have a very outspoken personality. So we could have some fun with it.
And we have a little bit of time as we're rolling into the end of the holiday season and the end of 2021. Coach, do you have a message to Riveters fans as we close out this chapter of the 7th season for this franchise?
The message would be, enjoy some time off, during the break, because the world has been a little crazy lately. So we all deserve that. But coming January, we want to see you back at the stands, enjoying the game, because we have a lot of games to play, and then we still have a lot of points, to gain. So we need your support for sure.
Indeed. We'll always want to see folks repping the Rivs. Well, Coach, I hope you take some time for yourself to spend and recharge those batteries, because they're going to need full-on Coach Ivo for 2022.
Absolutely.
Have a good one, Coach.
Thank you very much, Erica.